My name is Morgan, and we're going to be discussing data centers and sustainability in Nevada. So, let's firstly describe what data centers are so you can have a comprehension of how important they are to modern society. So, data centers are facilities which hold servers that are used for training and running AI solutions such as ChatGPT, storing cloud data in the case of iCloud or Google Photos, as well as data required for running APIs, which is just a fancy way of saying running applications. So, what's the problem with these facilities? Well, data centers are an essential part of society. However, they are causing power and energy usage that is excessive on top of excessive water usage. There's currently a lack of regulatory framework, which is exacerbating these problems, which makes it a problem in of itself. So, regarding energy, according to Miguel Yanez Barnuevo of Western Resource Advocates, energy demand will be 34% higher by 2035 due to these centers. On top of that, a 53% increase in greenhouse gas emissions, which have a larger role to play in global warming. And with an increase in energy demand, it's a supply and demand thing. So with increased demand, increased price of energy occurs. So a surge in energy prices is also expected to happen, and most aren't prepared for it. The next problem is going to be water usage. So this is a pretty big problem. As most people that live here know, we currently live in a desert and we're known for not getting much rain. So, on top of this, we have unprecedented drought. So it's causing water restrictions. It's been estimated that a typical data center consumes approximately 300,000 gallons of water daily. I got that from Vela Senor 2024. So to put that into perspective, right? A person utilizes 64,240 gallons of water annually, that's per year, to sustain their life. To shorten that, an AI data center consumes this amount in less than 6 hours. So in less than 6 hours, that AI data center is using the amount of water you would use in a year. So that really, puts it into perspective and helps you understand how much water is actually being used, because the normal person doesn't know how much 300,000 gallons of water is. They don't know how much 64,240 gallons of water is. But what you do know is how much water you use in a year. And it seems like a lot just being one person. But just consider using all that water in the span of 6 hours. It's actually mind-boggling. Now, the main concern, the biggest problem here is the lack of regulatory framework. So this is causing or allowing the AI data centers and the companies that run them to continue with growth and continue with wasteful use of resources. So the lack of federal oversight permits the exponential growth of data centers on top of the allowance for excessive resource depletion. All right, so regarding solutions, innovative nuclear solutions are required for the power problem. On top of that, water measuring and recycling is required for the water usage problem. And a triple threat of a solution: federal regulatory framework implementation is required to unify solutions across the board. So solution one, regarding energy. The solution proposed is small modular reactors, but what exactly are these? Well, they're a nuclear energy solution that differs from typical power plants. They're scalable, deployed in clusters, smaller and more condensed. Now, what makes these great is with old school power plants, they took a long time to build. They were custom. Now, again, with these, they're built on an assembly line, kind of like the Ford car was back in the day. So with that, it comes a lower associated cost, which is great. All right, Andy Patrizio of Network World Online, he's recognized this solution for data centers, saying SMRs aren't like traditional power plants. They're built on an assembly line, much like a car or truck, and they can be deployed in clusters depending on the amount of power needed. It's actually fascinating. So here is an image of a SMR on a truck. You can see that they are not huge. If you've seen this on the highway, it would just be a normal day. And here is something interesting I found. Rolls-Royce actually makes SMRs. What do you know? I believe they're also involved in aviation industry and things of the like. Now, solution number 2 regarding water. The recommendation is switching to gray water. So you can see the difference between the waters here. Gray water is used water without toxic chemicals and no excrement. So that's real important because black water has excrement. So policy should focus on enforcing regulations to ensure sustainable water usage practices, including mandatory recycling and limits on groundwater extraction. That came from Aravind. So measurement of water usage and a requirement of gray water adoption is essential. Solution 3 is going to be the regulatory framework. So according to Briscar, the FPI, which is FPA, the Federal Power Act, grants the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission the ability to create uniform regulations. These would span across the country. So the reason they're able to do this is because data centers convert data into electronic signals. Those signals get carried across the state lines. All right. The carrying through the state lines is just like if you were, I guess, trafficking narcotics. It becomes a federal issue at that point. So when the data or the electronic signals get carried across the state lines, it becomes a federal issue, right? So these, they get to, the data centers get to be classified as transmission facilities at that point. And that falls under federal jurisdiction. So the FERC has the authority to mandate efficiency standards for data centers because those data centers transmit electric energy in interstate commerce. So that's super important. And with that unified regulation, you can get a unified solution, which is what we need because, right now there's no regulation whatsoever. So we need a blanket regulation which can apply to all states depending on energy and water usage. So while the regulation itself can be uniform, it can also apply to each state individually. So they're able to draft up state legislation from that point. So that's why, some people say, I don't want the federal government involved. But this is why you might want to, right? Because once you have that base level work completed, then you can continue to do state regulations. So in conclusion, we have hopes for a cleaner environment, right? An existing healthy world and an existing healthy future world. We have conscious observations of what we're doing. So 3 solutions are needed: water measurement and new recycling methods, nuclear power, and the regulatory framework. So in a world that is living in both an AI race as well as the race to save our planet, we don't need to choose one or another, but instead choose both. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.